Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again on this Friday morning is Shea Dixon. Shea, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You got coffee in you, caffeine or something?
Yeah, no coffee. That's the other thing. If people don't know about me and my preferences, I've never had a cup of coffee in my life, but not for any reasons of I'm on any health kick or anything. I drink way too many Coca Colas for that to be any sort of factor. But yeah, I got my Coca Cola in me. We're rocking
A Coca-Cola every morning?
at least one, probably a few.
That's what they say, right? A Coca-Cola a day, keep the doctor away.
100%.
There you go. Yeah, I don't drink coffee either, so we're good. I just wake up and go.
Well,
We'll see how long that lasts.
too bad we don't have Billy on here today, who's already probably had multiple coffees and energy drink. I think he handles all that for us, so we're good.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I know the Lions coach, Dan Campbell, says he drinks like 10 energy drinks a day, and you're like, okay, well,
Not shocked.
good. That's about on brand. On brand. Looks on par for him. But all right, today we're gonna preview a little bit of our thoughts going into the Southern game. Uh, talk about some breakout candidates and what we want to see just moving forward in this kind of preview episode that we'll be doing every week on probably Friday morning. I think we're gonna make it, but we'll settle that in the coming weeks. But Shay, where do we want to start here as we open this podcast up? I know we talked to Brian Kelly last night. Those Thursday presses are always good, but they're not groundbreaking usually. Just what do you want to start here?
All right, I'm looking at my handy notebook. This
Yes,
is where all the good stuff about Kelly goes in my very good handwriting, as you can see if you're on the
it's
YouTube
actually pretty
page.
good handwriting. I'm not
Yeah, it's
gonna
it's
lie.
great handwriting actually.
Sounds better
All
than
right,
mine.
let's see. We were there. Let me run down some notes. Jack Besh, he said he has a stress fracture in his leg, which I'm guessing that was probably what kind of kept him in and out of fall camp. So that was kind of a
Yes,
reason he talked about
yeah.
Besh kind of slowly being worked back in.
And he's come
Um,
back. I mean, he was back from that, at the second half of fall camp, and I expected him to be kind of close to 100% at this point. But it sounds like they're still slowly ramping him up, which is a little concerning to me. But we'll get into that later.
let's see. I'll run through this fast. Mason Taylor, who is a true freshman that LSU signed this past class at tight end, which is obviously a big need position. I didn't actually think he would make this early of an impact, but Brian Kelly raved about him in camp. He said the other day or last night he put on 20 pounds over the summer. Just needs to get stronger as a blocker, but they're going to continue to play him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting soon. I know Cole Taylor started that first game, but we'll see how they work those tight ends. From an overall perspective, I thought this was interesting. He said clearly everybody knows they didn't start fast in that game, and he wanted that kind of sense of urgency for all four quarters, and he thought they came out just a little bit flat in that regard. But he really liked conditioning wise where they were in the fourth quarter. Guys weren't winded, none of that, and and they were able to kind of make that stage that comeback. So I think kudos to the offseason training program. They felt like it paid off there, even though they didn't win. But he said that this week in practice, so like normally in practice, they'll stretch and all that. Then they go to individual drills for like 20 minutes, which is
Yeah,
basically like everyone's in their position group and you're kind of just doing a walkthrough of, whatever it is,
yeah.
something,
Receiver drills,
yeah,
offensive
position
line footwork.
specific.
Yeah,
He said they skipped individuals and went straight into team stuff this week every day, trying to, from the start say, okay, we're right on to 11 on 11. Now get your energy ready. No lollygagging around in position groups for 20 minutes. And he hoped that would kind of eliminate some of that. Obviously, Mason Smith done for the year. No surprise here. Makai Wingo out of Missouri, who transferred in, freshman all SEC guy a year ago, played really well when Smith went down. I mean, he had 6 tackles in the game. He got the fumble recovery at the goal line at the end to set him up for that 99-yard drive. So he'll get the start alongside Jaquel and Roy on the D line. And really, he talked a little bit about like Will Campbell had to play his first game ever at left tackle and go
yeah.
start to finish against a really good D line against FSU. He said they'll have to rotate guys and it's tough to do, obviously, every game rotating guys, but he wants to keep Campbell and them a little bit more fresh and not have to go start to finish. So we'll see the O line move around a bit this week. He didn't say anything too specific there about what they're going to do, but we'll find out come Saturday night. I think we'll probably see a few different O line combos as that game goes on.
Yeah.
Obviously, Kelly's excited. It's his first game in Tiger Stadium. He talked about that a lot, so I'm sure that a sellout crowd is cool for him. And then I don't know. It sounds like Malik Neighbors may be back at punt return again, or at least get a shot. Because kind of his feeling was, he said, in all my years of 30 plus years of coaching, the worst thing you can do right here is someone who's one of the most talented players on your team for good reason and was chosen for that spot for a good reason. That he goes out there and messes up, and that you never let him have that shot again, or you turn your back
Yeah.
on him, and his confidence goes even lower. So whether it's Sage Ryan, whether it's him, we'll kind of see what's going on at the punt return spot. And I'd say both of them should probably get back there and see how they look, so you can kind of get a vibe of what your actual options are and what you want to do moving forward. Because a week from now they'll play Mississippi State in the SEC opener. So that's kind of the main takeaways I thought from Kelly. I don't know if I missed anything, Matthew. You were there.
No, I think you got everything. We also talked to players on Wednesday, and player interviews always hit or miss. You know, sometimes you'll get good answers, sometimes you won't. That's just kind of how it goes. We had Jarek Bernard Converse, who kind of just didn't say anything crazy, even though he's a great speaker and obviously just answers the questions honestly. But you get a lot from the team after losses, or usually from athletes after losses. It's like, we know what we have to do better. We're working on it, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I did think it was interesting to hear from Garrett Dellinger and hear about his thoughts on the first time snapping the ball consistently in a game, and he's willing to move around wherever they need him to. And so, from that perspective, who else did we get on Wednesday?
Talked to
Do we even
Dre Jenkins.
Ray Jenkins?
I think he's pretty much a leader. God, you got to think about it, guys, that Dre Jenkins has been on this team since 2018, redshirted. Mom passed away right after that season, wins a national championship in 19, then sort of has to become the guy in 20, 21,
Yeah.
22. I mean, he's caught game winners at Arkansas last year against Florida and against Texas A&M at the very end, last game of the season. Obviously caught that game winner with about 20 seconds left. And this would have been obviously the game tying touchdown with no time left. So he's proving to be a really clutch option, kind of when you get into that crunch time in the final minutes, as a guy who can get the end zone and do the job for you. So I enjoyed talking to him. You could tell he spent a lot of time with neighbors because of the muffed punts, and he's in the receiver room, but also Butte, who he said that's a once in a lifetime bad game for Kayshawn. He was like, he is the best player on our team. He will not do that every week. And he said people beat up on Kayshawn. He's like, nobody's beating up on Kayshawn more than himself. And it's our job as teammates to kind of pick him up and carry him through it. And he sounded like he expects Kayshawn to have a really big game against Southern. I would not be surprised by that. But yeah, that was kind of the takeaways from the week. Like you said, nothing too wild. A lot of the guys just saying, hey, look, we know what we did. We know we lacked urgency. We know we didn't execute a lot of the times, but it's stuff we feel good about fixing in practice. And I think it's good for them that they've got this Southern game before Mississippi State. And we'll dive right in there. Matthew, I'll start. Southern, let's see, a week ago, this is great right here. Shout out Southern. Well, it wasn't NAIA school, but Florida Memorial University was on the receiving end of an 86 to nothing defeat. This was like 50 to nothing at halftime. And some Southern fans were in my mentions. And I was like, what does 50 to nothing look like at halftime on Twitter? I was like, I've got to know what this looked like. And they're like, this honestly, it looks like a JV squad out there. And Southern are taking out their starters the first quarter, second quarter, it sounded like. And we're still kind of running all over them. But ultimately, Southern rushed for 400 yards. They kept the kind of quarterback who was going to start. They pulled a Brian Kelly. They didn't name it till game time, but it was Bichon McCray, and he didn't have to do much. 7 of 12 passing, 79 yards, a couple touchdowns. He ran it for 78 yards. And you could call it a three-headed monster at running back, three running backs, but really it was a four-headed monster on the ground with McCray running it. But they've got three running backs, all who went for 85, 84, and 84 yards. So they kind of split them up evenly. But their guy is Braylon Morgan, who anyone around Baton Rouge will remember. He was a Catholic High stand out back in the 2020 class. So he's a few years older now, out of high school, and been in that Southern program for a bit. But he had a big game to start things out. He'll be sort of their bell cow. And then Dallas Black on the O line is considered to be one of the best O linemen out in the SWAC. And Deion Sanders, look, Matty B. Deion Sanders is getting all the SWAC pub right now. They signed Travis Hunter. They're projected to win the SWAC, but Southern's projected to come out of the West, and this will be the first time they've played up to FBS level competition since 2018. They played TCU. That was a 55-7 game. So 2018 to now, there probably aren't any guys on this Southern team who are on that team, unless they've got one or two who are kind of fifth, 6 year guys. But
Mhm.
it'll be a cool opportunity, obviously. If you've got a roster full of guys who haven't played an FBS team, it gets to be LSU, the other hometown team. The first time ever these two programs are meeting, the first time LSU's ever played an HBCU. So a lot of cool history on the line here. And given it is the first time they played an HBCU, no better way to kick things off than playing Southern. They play Grambling next year, but no better way to kick things off than here in town. Should be an awesome environment, sold out crowd. I kind of ran you down offensively. Defensively, Matty B, they do have a couple guys. I know Brian Kelly talked about
Oh, yeah.
they said no pushover on the D line. He said they actually will have some guys that can test them.
Yeah, that's gonna be the interesting part because of what we saw last week, right? That's what we saw against Florida State. And defensively, on the defensive line, you have Jason Dumas and Jordan Lewis as your two-headed monster, two guys who were selected to the first team, all SWAC defense team. Jason Dumas was actually had 8.5 sacks, 17.5 tackles for loss last year for Prairie View. They add him, and then Jordan Lewis is a returner there. So you have a two-headed monster on the defensive line that, in theory, if LSU is not up to snuff, even if um, even if it's only Southern they're playing, they're still gonna have problems here, and that's not the look you want, especially coming off that Florida State game. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if initially there were a couple times where Jane Daniels had to run for his life. I mean, just on a couple of occasions. I think they're going to be fine. I think they'll rotate guys in, and obviously this isn't like a normal preview because it is the FCS school you're playing. But still, that's probably the one aspect of this game I'm really looking forward to seeing is okay, yeah, this is Southern, but they have two defensive linemen that can probably play at an FBS level, even if I'm not saying it's a P5 level, but they can play at an FBS level. So that's the main thing for me going into this game. I wrote a whole story on the best players LSU plays the entire season, and Jason Dumas was the one for me from Southern that I had written down. So that's going to be interesting. Like you
And
said, they're projected to come in first in the West by the coaches. Obviously, you have Jackson State on the other side, but I mean, it's a team. They got a team over there at Southern, which is
yeah,
great to see.
and he's the current FCS leader in sacks. So is it Dumas or is it? Gosh, maybe I skipped right.
I think it was the
That
other.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it was
that
Lewis.
that might be Lewis, who currently leads the FCS in sacks.
Yeah,
Anyways, regardless, you get the sense that this will be a game that they can at least get some the offensive line tested, and the front seven will be tested because Southern's going to try to run the football a good bit.
yeah.
Like you said, this is kind of a shortened version of it, abbreviated version of what our normal weekly preview will be, just because of the opponent. We kind of gave you a quick rundown there of kind of the strengths of Southern and a sold out crowd. It'll be fun to watch. I did want to pump. We'll have a few more things here. This is one of our shorter pods each week, just so that we can kind of give you something to gnaw on about the opposing team and about this matchup before the weekend hits. You do a film study, a couple of them each week, but one of them that I think LSU fans really wanted to see and got a lot of conversation going on the Bengal Tiger was about Jack Bech. And a year ago, he led LSU in catches, or at least right up there in catches.
And he was he
But
was number one.
yeah, he came out in game one. He got one target, got one catch. Brian Kelly mentioned the stress fracture. It was kind of something he had battled through camp, but he was stressed out. He was out there. Kind of the shortened version, Matty B. What did you see when you watched the film when Bech was out there? Was he always open? Was he never open? Was it just kind of not the right calls for him? Kind of what's the takeaway?
There were definitely some occasions where he was open. But the hard part the reason why I struggle to evaluate Jayden Daniels as a passer in that game is because of the offensive line. And it's why I don't want to be like, oh, this offense is very limited. All the takeaways that I would have normally, I think, from a game like that, where there was very little in the way of explosive passing, I have to take with a grain of salt because the offensive line struggled so much. So there were a couple of occasions where Jack Besh was open over the middle, on an outbreaking route, on an intermediate route. There were opportunities for them to get the ball to Jack Besh, but the offensive line was so bad that I think the mental clock, which we all know quarterbacks have mental clocks in their head, I think it just was so quick for Jayden Daniels, and I think it deserved to be at that point. So there were opportunities to get Jack Besh the ball more. I can't blame them too much for not throwing the ball. The one thing that and this is what I wrote about, was I just don't think he was on the field enough. I'm not even talking about the reception numbers yet, or the yards numbers, which I think will have to increase as the season goes on, which hopefully they will. But he was only on the field for, I counted, 15 non penalty plays, and it makes a lot more sense when you go back and when you hear Brian Kelly talk about that they want to work him back into it. They're still hesitant coming off the injury, which is a pretty big concern for me, considering, again, you have Mississippi State coming up in like 8 days, and then Auburn in 2 weeks after that. You need Jack Best to be a pivotal part of this offense moving forward. And if he's not healthy at this point, 3 weeks after I thought he was healthy, then how long is it going to take to get him back to 100%? Because while this receiver room is very good, Jack Best, for a lot of the offseason, was talked about as like the second or third best receiver on this team, and I didn't really have a problem with that. So you need Jack Best to get healthy. That's going to be the big thing moving forward, is that I thought he was, if not 100%, I thought he was like 80%, 70%. I thought he looked fine in the game. Like, I didn't see anything that
And
made me think he was hurt.
Besh is the type at 70% that's going to play like he's 100. Like
Oh,
that's
yeah.
just the DNA that he's built with. So I'm with you. I think
Yeah.
that
And
as time goes on, Besh will be fine. Remember, Matthew, they only have 8 receivers on scholarship. Like they have a really talented room, but when Besh is banged up, when Hilton and Ibieta are kind of in and out of the lineup as well,
yeah.
you sort of are relying on about 5 guys, which we saw kind of pretty evenly spread out in the past game. They looked to Mason Taylor at tight end a lot, so that will be something to watch. I
Yeah,
think going
definitely
forward.
the Mason Taylor impact I wrote about as well, which I'll summarize real quickly. It did feel like they used Mason Taylor in that Jack Best way, in a sense, last week. Um, but not in the terms of Jack Best can also take the top off of defense, or at least you could throw him a jump ball. There's plays where Jack Best obviously excels that Mason Taylor doesn't at this point, but Mason Taylor was very good, and they used him and Cole Taylor a ton in the game. I'd have to go back and look at the snap counts, but Mason Taylor and Cole Taylor got a lot
Well,
of reps.
this is Mike Denbrock, the OC, who is at Cincinnati. He's been with Kelly before, whether it was while he was at Cincinnati, whether it's Kelly when he's at Notre Dame. They love 2 tight end sets. I mean, they love playing multiple tight ends. LSU may not have the personnel for that right now, or at least not as good as you want it to be, but it's evident they're not going to stray away. They're not like scrapping that from the playbook. It's clear they still want to see what they can do playing a couple guys at once out there at tight end. We'll wrap things up here with, we're going to do a breakout player we each want to see, then one thing we each want to see. So you can adjust that to your answers. I'll
Yeah.
start. I'll go breakout player first. I want to see. I want to see Keishon Butte have a big
Oh,
game.
I was wondering if you would take the
You can
obvious
go with
one
that
here.
too. That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
the obvious one, and I
yeah.
don't. It doesn't need any explanation. He should dominate a game like this. I want to see him go out, and I fully believe he can. And I just want to see them give him the chance to do that and boost that confidence before SEC play.
I think last year when they played McNeese, that was the Mason Smith breakout game where he had like 3.5 sacks, something like that, and a bunch of tackles for loss. I'm gonna look at. I think Mekhi Wingo can put up similar numbers, or Jaquelin Roy. So I'll take Jaquelin Roy and kind of hedge it with Mekhi Wingo. If one of them has a big game, I'll take credit for it either way. But Jaquelin Roy, I think, is gonna be my guy here. If he is the player which a lot of people believe him to be, which Pro Football Focus had him rated as like a top 10 pass rusher for an interior defensive lineman last year. And I think he had a good first game against Florida State, but there's just and he obviously eats up a lot of blocks. Like he has a tough job, really tough job as either the nose or in one of those inside techniques. I think this could be a game where Jaquelin Roy has that Mason Smith game from last year against McNeese, like that 2 sack game, 2.5 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss, something like that, where you're like, oh, Jaquelin Roy is just gonna dominate this game because no Ollie Gay early in the first half of the game. Obviously, Mason Smith's out. You have BJ Ojolari at the jack position still, but as far as interior defensive line, Jaquelin Roy, I think, is going to have perhaps the best statistical game of his career. So put me down for that.
All right. One thing we want to see, I'm going to steal the easiest one again. I want to see special teams look good in the sense of I don't want to see any I don't want to see any turnovers, no muff punts. Don't kick the ball out of bounds on kickoffs, which they didn't do. Florida State did, but I'm adding that to my list. Successfully convert your extra points, successfully get off your field goals. I'm not saying I'm holding you to making them all. I just actually be able to get it off. Um, Everything, all of those things, that blocking assignments are executed correctly on extra points or on field goals, things that you easily forget about because they should be coached and executed and done every game to where it's something that's not even part of the conversation, good or bad, or like it's certainly
Yeah.
not bad. It's just completely glossed over because everybody expects it to look good. That's where I'm at right now with special teams. It was so bad that now I'm demanding perfection this time. I've got to see them actually do all the simple things correctly this week, which you should have no trouble doing in this game.
Yeah, and they're gonna have plenty of opportunities to kick the ball. You would think, even if they only score like 42 or 49 points, that's 6 or 7
And they
right there.
may have a lot of punt returns. You know, if you're playing well this
Yep.
game, you're going to have a lot of chance to return punts.
Yes. So special teams will have a lot of attention on it. And I'm interested to see how the crowd reacts when they make their first extra point. Like, is it gonna be a sarcastic like cheer?
Oh,
Like,
100%. These
hey,
people are petty when they catch that first punt return or fair catch it and it's successfully done, or they
yeah.
make the extra point or field goal. It will be one of the biggest cheers you hear all night. Oh, petty, petty, petty.
Oh
All right, what are you
boy,
going with?
boy. I have two different answers, but since we talked about the Southern defensive line against the LSU offensive line, I'll leave that one out. But I am watching that. That is the one probably main thing for me. But secondly, I want to see how they run the ball. I want to
Yep, I
see.
like
We did
that.
not see them run the ball in terms of handing the ball off to running backs. They were not effective in that at all without John Emery. Noah Kane is what he is at this point. We kind of know he's not explosive, but he can move the ball, 3-4 yards or so in a cloud of dust. Armani Goodwin, I think he could have maybe a couple explosive runs. We'll see how much we see Josh Williams, but I think running the ball, and I think between the tackles more than anything, running the ball between the tackles and being effective with that against Southern, who albeit has good defensive line, but you should be able to run the ball against them. So that's what I'm looking for.
That was going to be my go-to if I didn't take the easy way out with special teams. So yes, I'd like to see them run the football successfully this week. I remember what 2 years ago was last year. These two seasons really blend together the past two seasons,
Yes.
but like early on in the season, they literally could not run the football. And then it was like it felt like they're going to have to pass it on every play now just because they can't run it. Obviously, they eventually got things fixed those years, but that's got to get. I want to see that fixed this week. I want to see production in the run game.
I feel like that was both years. I feel like that was last year and this
Probably.
year. Like it just didn't. Nothing really stands out about those 2 years. But all right, man. I think that's all we have. Good 20-25 minute podcast. Get people maybe on their way to the game listening. There you go. But well, that's all we have for y'all today. We hope y'all enjoyed it. Again, the podcast schedule, we've talked about it before, will be kind of set next week going into. We'll have the post game show. We'll have the Monday mailbag, Tuesday recruiting pod. Wednesday we'll have a guest on, and then we'll have this on probably Friday mornings moving forward. We'll set that in stone in the coming weeks. So we appreciate y'all for joining us. Subscribe if you haven't already. Become a subscriber to the Bengal Tiger on 3 for $1 for an entire year. We are still running that offer. So if you haven't already, become a sub. Send it to an LSU fan to become a sub, all that good stuff. We greatly appreciate it. But yeah, we will talk to y'all later.